much, Karen. I also want to thank you and Marco for the invitation to be in this Strand series. And hello, Maria. I'm very pleased to be here with you. We collaborated. It's been maybe 5 years since we met, but we've collaborated, as Maria mentioned, in this Translating Electronic Literature project. I think it was between 2017 and 2018. And I think she explained some of the framework that we developed for the project. And it's good that she has given you some idea of the kind of work that electronic literature writers do. These two works, Bird Singing Other Birds songs, and also the Winnipeg poem, are kind of classical, modern classical works in electronic literature in their different genres. And they're very interesting for many reasons. I think they illustrate many of the things that I have to say about the problem of translating electronic literature. And I'm going to share my screen too, so that I don't get lost. Let me see if you see are you seeing the slide?
Yeah, that's
change?
Perfect.
Yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to start with a quote by John Cayley, who's also a practitioner of digital and electronic literature, and also a theoretician, very important thinker on the relation between language and media. And this is from an article by Cayley on translation as process. So let me quote: "I have deployed techniques in my work to the extent that a considerable proportion of what I have made from the late 1980s up until the mid-2000s is currently unreadable, not because its compositional principles are inherently opaque, but because certain specific technologies in which I chose to express these principles have become effectively obsolete. Now, let us say that I believed that one or another work from this period and in this condition was deserving of translation into a natural language other than English. At the very least, there would have to be some attempt to engineer technically a reading of the work that would form some part of the reading that is an initial and fundamental process in what might then become a conventional practice of translation. My point is that this reading as re-engineering, this reading as an address to specific techniques, is simply an ineluctable aspect of reading itself, of all reading." So he's making the claim, and I think this connects with the title of this session, Materialities of Literature. So he's making the claim that somehow you always have to have some kind of technical inscription that is required for a process of reading. So I'm going to show you a clip from one of John Cayley's projects, the Readers Project, one of his most fascinating projects. And just for you to get a sense of what this would be, what it would be like to translate this project if we had to translate a project like this. So the video is more or less self-explanatory, so I don't have to explain what the project is.
The Readers Project.
Can you hear?
The Readers Project is a collection of distributed, performative, quasi-autonomous poetic readers, active procedural entities with distinct reading behaviors and strategies. We release these readers onto inscribed surfaces constituted by their texts, from conventional found texts through poetic reconfigurations of appropriated sources to original compositions by the project's collaborators. Current installations from the Readers Project involve two vertically oriented projections, each with a page-like layout and the whole pointedly reminiscent of a book-like opening. As the readers traverse the projected pages, their readings are visually and sonically aestheticized by language-driven algorithms. Visitors to an installation are able to subscribe to particular readers, using internet-connected cell phones or laptops, and follow their subscribed readings live. The single perspective interfaces provide access to individual readers, revealing their distinct reading strategies and their particular literary potentials. The diagram reader uses natural language statistics hacked from the internet in order to be more aware of certain collocational affinities between the word it is currently reading and that word's neighbors. This reader is descended from a simple Western linear reader, but it tends to wander from a simple reader's path, attracted by phrases it may make by lighting on neighbors other than its special neighbor to the right. The diagram reader currently comes in two varieties. One highlights its neighbors visually. It strays, but it tends to move to the right and downwards, as human readers do. Its sibling reader pays more attention to neighbors above, below, or to the left. Visually, this reader generates a halo of faded words just beyond its immediate neighbors. The mesostic reader moves through the text by seeking the letters of a word or phrase that it is required to spell and respell. When it finds each letter, it changes the color of the word that contains it, while capitalizing the found letter. This reader reactivates literary processes that were practiced by Emmett Williams, John Cage, Jackson McClough, and others, perhaps best characterized as reading through a text. The project's mesostic reader also encapsulates simple natural language models that attempt to constrain its choices of spelling word to those that will also make phrases bearing some affinity to the text through which it reads. The project's collaborators, both literary practitioners, may perform live in conjunction with an installation, following one or other of the readers and improvising with its reading. During such a performance, members of the audience with internet access are able to subscribe to these same readers in real time. Such a performance is best presented with the main installation as backdrop.
Okay, so let me move forward. So when you look at that particular work, you see something that we already have seen in Maria Mencia's work, which is many of these works come in several instantiations. So they can be, in this case, a web application, or they can be an installation in a gallery. They can be a smartphone application, and they'll have these multiple instantiations. In many cases with specific adaptations for each medium. So the kind of remediation or transmedia distribution of signals and forms. So when Cayley talks about re-engineering the text in order to make it to become readable when its platform or its environment are not executable anymore, we are seeing different layers of re-engineering. We can think of re-engineering at the level of hardware. So often, digital works are necessarily made for a specific environment using a specific machine. And this means that for instance, the kind of microprocessor in that machine, or the kind of screen. So the properties, the material properties of the hardware will have some relevance for the kinds of literary effects, the way the forms are generated or presented. But also, you also have the code. So you also have the source code. And codes and languages, programming languages often change. So Maria was giving the example of the early work, Birds Singing Other Birds' Song. And one of the instantiations of that work was in Flash. Flash was a technology that became obsolete because the company stopped developing and updating. And so eventually it became unreliable for browsers. run that code, and so they stopped running that particular code. This means that a whole generation of electronic literature works from the late 1990s and early 2000s up until 2010, more or less, have become obsolete for contemporary conditions of execution of code. So when you think about text, you have to think about the encoding, so how texts are represented and tagged so that it is readable by the machine, but also the way the text is programmed in so that it is presented in a specific graphical, temporal, kinetic, interactive, navigational, and multimodal instantiation. So when you think about reengineering, we are really thinking about all these different layers. So one of the first theories of digital media was Espen Harset's 1997 cybertext. Actually was talking not only about digital texts per se, but texts that have multiple material instantiations and multiple configurations. And according to Harset, we could describe the relation between code and the instantiation of code as sound or image or text on the screen as a relation between texton and scripton. So the idea behind cybertext is that cybertexts are usually those texts that have multiple material instantiations, and those instantiations often depend on the interaction with the user or the reader, but also with the execution, the environment where the program is running the text. And another author, Philippe Bouts, a French, also a theoretician of digital literature and of translation, he adds another element to this, let's say, this fluidity, this fungibility of the digital sign, the digital text, which he calls lability. Lability consists in the dependence of the result of the execution of a program on the technological context of this execution. It is above all a technological fact. Clearly, the same program that is neither generative nor hypertextual, but merely describes a display process, for example, an animation, actually produces different animations depending on the technological context in which it is executed. Unfortunately, the actual observation of lability phenomena shows that sometimes scriptons appear, signs in the read media, which do not originate in the code. It asks that do not emanate from any texton. This phenomenon is logical because lability is not caused by the program, but by the complete technological context at runtime. So the claim that Boots is making here is that it's not only the code that determines how the scriptons appear. So what we see on the screen, it's not just determined by the source code that is giving us different instantiations. So we refresh the text and we have a different sentence, or we click and you have a different output. It's not only that, it's also whether you are seeing in a specific environment. So the resolution of the screen, the microprocessor, all those elements can have effects that have semiotic, some kind of semiotic consequence, but are not encapsulated in the code. They are part of the conditions of execution of the machine. And actually, this is something that he discovered with his own animated poems that he had built originally in the 1980s. And when he was running them through other machines, he noticed that certain elements disappeared, or certain elements would appear that weren't there at the beginning. So he realized that those elements were generated by the conditions of execution of the program themselves. So this is one aspect that we have to think about when we think about electronic literature creations, or in general, digital creations. One text, one article that was produced in 2004 by Nick Montfort and Noah Wodry-Prun had 4 types of recommendation for preserving electronic literature works. So one is old hardware is preserved to run old systems. So this is, for instance, the approach that we see in the Media Archaeology Lab at University of Boulder, Colorado, where they keep all the old machines and the old programs, and they keep running the texts, the digital texts, using those original environments. The second strategy would be old programs are emulated or interpreted on new hardware. So this implies adapting the program to a new hardware environment. The other is old programs and media are migrated to new systems. So you have to transport the programs and the media to a new system. So a different kind of translation. And finally, systems are documented along with instructions for recreating them. Again, this is a strategy that is often, I think, not entirely important for most digital authors and digital writers to the prejudice of their works, because they have not documented how the work was created or the effect that was aimed. And so often when the environment changes, or the software changes, or the web browser changes, the programs become unreadable. So one interesting laboratory that has been looking at the problem of recreating and recovering these early electronic literature works is the Electronic Literature Lab at Washington State University. And they had a project a few years ago that was consisted in inviting some of the early authors of hyperfiction who had produced the first hyperfiction texts in the early 1990s to come to the laboratory, and using the original machines and the original codes to explain and talk about and show how the reading would go through the texts. So how the hyperfiction would be experienced by the reader in their original intention. So one quote that I have from the article that resulted from our project that Mencia was referring to earlier: translation must take into account the conditions of performativity that define media as software, and how those material conditions have relocated processes of translation within general processes of remediation. If translation is redefined as remediation between languages, then elite translation can be described as a multidimensional process of remediation that involves natural languages, computer codes, and media materialities. So I will finish by giving you an example of a project that was included in our original research group, which is actually, it's not this project, but I also wanted to show you something from Charlie Jackson's Patchwork Girl. So the project that I'm referring to is a recreation, a remediation of Michael Joyce's Afternoon, a Story. So Michael Joyce's Afternoon, a Story is generally seen as one of the first hypertext fictions produced in the United States in the late 1980s, and it went through several editions until 2004 and several adaptations. And our project tested another form of translating that particular work into a different format and for a different environment. But before we move, let me show you a little bit, before we move to that particular project, let me show you Shelley Jackson in this Pathfinders project. So she's explaining how her original work was meant to be read. So let me see if I can find the screen here. Yes, this one. So Patchwork Girl is a very famous canonical work of hypertext fiction that is a kind of rewriting of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And so the Patchwork Girl is this fictional character that is the companion to the creature, to Frankenstein's creature. And Shelley Jackson was really experimenting with the hypertext at the very beginning. So we will see how she talks about the original software program.
Oh no, it's a cultural divide. I'm gonna get it on the.
Sorry about the ad.
People.
Another ad.
Don't worry, I think it's inevitable these days. We'll just sit it out.
Okay, I think we are there. Are we there? Yes, I think so.
Space can contain a large amount of text. Most authors will want to split large spaces into more manageable parts. Just add an unusual character where you want each writing space to end and choose Explode from the menu. I cut up the quilt, creating a new copy of each paragraph in its own writing space. The exploding spaces are all created inside a new writing space, a very well-shaped girl, which I stuffed with cotton water.
So I guess it's difficult to control. It's impossible to control YouTube. But so you can see that she was trying to explain the actual structure of the narrative. So how the different lexias of the text were put together and how the experience of reading the text through those windows of that particular program worked. I don't think Patchwork Girl has been translated, as far as I know, into other software systems. But the project that I wanted to show you is Afternoon, a Story, as an example of the kinds of problems that electronic literature creates for translators. So Afternoon, a Story was a hyperfiction created in 1987. So one of the very, very first. The concept of hypertext was still, well, not new because it dates back to the late 1960s and early 1970s, but the experimentation with fictional narrative was pretty new at the time. So they were using Story Space, and this program was a software program that the first generation of digital fictional writers adopted. And then this was distributed first on floppy disks, then on CD-ROM, and later on as a flash drive. So Afternoon, a Story contains 538 lexias connected by 948 hyperlinks. One of the interesting experiences of reading this story is that if you read sequentially, you only had like 35 bits of the narratives, 35 sequences. you had to explore the text in order to find the links, because the links were not marked, so you could not see where the link was. So the convention of having the link was not in place yet, and the author also explored this form. So if we go to let me share this new screen. So if you go to the original screen format, so this is how the story would be navigated. For directions, click yes. To start, press return. So the form is very crude, no? Basically, you go, it's yes, no, and then you have links, and then you can have some access to your own history of browsing the story. So you are really at the beginning of hypertext as a form of organizing a fictional narrative. So in our project, when we decided to translate afternoon into French, one of the problems was, how could you recreate this structure? How would you translate the interface, translate the underlying code that was in this particular program? And one of the solutions we came up with was to move it into a different environment. Let me just go back to the slides and give you another quote before I show you the resulting project. So the significance of this particular work, and actually the work was included in the Northern Anthology of Contemporary Fiction, was the first hypertext fiction to be included in this anthology, was, well, of course, also because of the quality of Joyce's work. He was a novelist, and he had quite a few novels at print novels when he started experimenting with hypertext. And he was really experimenting, again, like Shelley Jackson, how you could link the structure of narrative to the particular media form that you were exploring. And that's what he does in this particular narrative. We don't have the time to go into the story, but the hypertext structure is very much part of the content of the narrative. So this is how we translated the story for an environment that is quite different. And it was necessary to map all the narrative structure before we could translate the story. So I'm going to show you the resulting Twine version. So we use Twine, which is a platform that is currently very popular for game design and also for hyperfiction. So it was necessary to map all the structure of relations of the different lexias, so all the different links across the corpus of segments. So this was and actually it's still unfinished. I was talking to one of the members of the project, Gabriel Tremblay, about this version, and I think it's still unfinished. But let me show you so if we start here, so this is the editing facet of the project. So if we start here, this is what we see, no? So this would be, so afternoon, a story, traduction française. So these are, it's still underdeveloped, but this would be how we would emulate some of the original windows, the typography, the way the links were set up in I think one of the issues that was not solved was how we would treat the links, because the links in the original experience were not highlighted. So you had to find the links, so they were not clearly visible. No. So again, you see, to go back to the earlier quote by John Cayley, you see that this entwining between techniques and language that happens with the electronic literature really requires that we engage with many different layers that are somehow closely involved in the literary, in creating the literary experience, the semiotic experience of this type of textuality. So, thank you.